All right, good evening, everyone. As the shir is dedicated by A.B. Spry for the safety of our troops, for Zev Ben Yuta, by Shimon Klein, Le'ilui Nishmas, Asher Ansh Ben Yehuda, Gilbas Shimon Pinchas, by Irving Fishbaum for Issa Ben Razel and Eliezer Ben Razel, by Avigdor Aya Ben Rivka and Meir Ben Chayesar. They should have a refuah shlema b'seich she'achel Yisrael. We welcome in Eddie Chazan and A.B. Spry and Nachmi Mansky, Yitz Fuchs, Dr. Udell, Irving Fishbaum, Dr. Guy, Barish Gesselman, Mo Kushner, Marshall Castle, Ruvain Pollack, Nachman Chapler, Naftali Javelin, Aaron Swade, Yitzi Muller, Ilya Shutman, Rabbi Kranz, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Abe Arbach, Larry Tuchinski. Here in the shul we have Reb Blumenfeld, Gedalia, Reb Kramer, Rich, Saba, and Ruvain Shannet, David Helfgott on Kol Lashon, and we are learning now 2 lines from the bottom of Ayin Hamad Base. Today's daf is easier. It's not easy street by any means, but it is easier than yesterday's daf, which was a doozy. As a matter of fact, I don't think since Brachas I marked on Kol Lashon next to the daf, I put in parentheses hard. So last night was a hard daf. Not for a veteran like Ruvain, but for someone like me, it was hard. I should have learned the next 2 lines because it really is a postscript on what we learned yesterday. We had the case where, of course, our well-known, infamous, notorious in post offices around the Fruited Plain, Marshall Castle, we said that where Yitzhak Irving said that he stole, and they were Muslim. What happened was Marshall said, I did steal, and I did slaughter, and I did sell it, but not in front of Yitzhak and Irving, and he brought 2 witnesses that Yitzhak Irving couldn't have seen it, and then 2 witnesses came and said that indeed Marshall stole and sold it. So we said that Yitzhak Irving have to pay kafel since they claimed that Marshall stole it and it wasn't true. The problem is, why did they have to pay kafel? Since Marshall admitted he has to pay the original, so they weren't depriving him of the original, they are only trying to deprive him of the kafel, of the extra payment. So why should they have to pay 2? And that's what the Gemara addresses now. Amamar, hey mishalman tashlumei kafel, says the Gemara, why? Since Marshall, before the verdict was issued, Marshall admitted to being chayiv the original, and therefore he has to pay the original. So they only wanted to be mechayiv him the second payment. Why do they have to pay both the original and the kafel? The Rav, you're right. Tani tishlum de kafel, to complete it to kafel. In other words, they have to pay only the second payment. And now we start the top of Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, a completely new start, a completely new sugya. Breathe a sigh of relief. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Amen. By the way, Rabbi Isai, I give regards to everybody from Mark Frankel. I spoke to him today. He's been working because he has a lot of people out. He's been starting to work 3:30 in the morning. And I spoke to him yet 5 o'clock this afternoon. He was still not home. So he told me that when he's going to get home, he's going to collapse. But he is up to date. And he sends everybody regards as we welcome him, Pesach Siegelman. Pesach, perfect timing as we start the top of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph at the 2 dots. Now, as always, we start, it's martial law. We start with martial. Ganav v'hikdish, if Marshall stole, then he dedicated it, and then he slaughtered or sold it, so he only pays kefil, he doesn't pay because he slaughtered that which is hektish. Says Imre, I understand why Marshall is not chayiv dalad v'hei for slaughtering it, because it wasn't his. The hektish katavach, because he slaughtered that which was of hektish. V'loy demari katavach, it wasn't Abi's who he stole it from, because he already dedicated it. But says the Gemara, Marshall should be chayiv for being makdish it, because being makdish is like selling it, just like if he would have sold it to Gedalia, he would be chayiv for moving it into a different rishus. So when he's makdish it, he's also, so to speak, moving it into the different rishus, into the rishus of Gavaya, and that's what the Gemara says. Ela hektish li chayiv. Before he slaughtered it, he should be chayiv for being makdish it. Mali machul, what's the difference if he sold it to Gedalia that he would be chayiv for selling it? Mali machul shemaim. When he's makdish it, he's, so to speak, moving it into the domain of hektish. Says the Gemara, you know who this is going like? Homani Reb Shimon he Amar Kochim shechayiv b'achri yusan. Kochim that you're responsible to replace b'reshusei demare kaima belongs in the ownership in the reshus of the owner. So therefore, since Marshall dedicated it as a neder and he said hari alai, so therefore a neder, when he says hari alai shlamim, means that if it's lost or stolen, he has to replace it. So it's considered still his. So it never moved out of his rishus. Says the Gemara, you can't say this part of the Mishnah is Reb Shimon, because Hamid is say for Reb Shimon Avi, since the end of the Mishnah is going like Reb Shimon, then Reish will have Reb Shimon, then the beginning of the Mishnah is not going like Reb Shimon. Says the Gemara, it's talking about where he dedicated it as Kochim Kalim. Kochim Kalim is the more lenient type of Kochim, like a Shlomim, like Meiser Behema, like a Toida, and Valib Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and it's going according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Dama Kochim Kalim Amam Bailamu. And therefore, it's still considered in his rishus, and it's not like Mechira. It never went out of his rishus. As we welcome in Baruch Ian, you have to excuse Baruch. He had to find parking with all the ice around. He had a hard time. I understand, Baruch. It's understandable. We won't mention why there should be in Deerfield Beach ice, but okay, don't ask questions. Sandy Grunfeld is...
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle, unbelievable. Sandy Grunfeld and Jay Siegel is joining us now, and the Gemara says, but if this is talking about where it's Kochim Kalim, so that would mean that if Marshall dedicated it as an oila, which is Kochim, then he would be chayiv. Because just by dedicating it, it's like selling it. He's moving out of his rishus to the rishus of Hekdesh. Aval Kochim mai. What would be if he dedicates it as Holy of Holies, like an oila, burnt offering, which is Kula Kalu La Hashem, that's why it's called an oila, it goes up totally La Hashem, and it's Kochim, then Tashumi Dal, then Misham Tashumi Dal V'chamisha, because that would be like Mocher, because it's like moving it into the Rishus of the Hekdesh. Aditoni Reisha, Ganav V'tovach V'acha Kachikdish, if he stole and slaughtered and only then sanctified it. Misham Tashlumei Dal V'hei, no, we could have made a distinction, Liflig V'lisnei B'dida, even if he was Hikdish at first. The only time if he's hikdish at first, he's not chayiv dalvei, is because it's kachim kalim, and that's still mum and bailam. But kachim, which moves into the complete rishus of hekdish, like an oila, and that would be like selling it, because just like selling it, it's moving it to a different domain. So also being makdish at kachim, it's moving it into the rishus of gavaya, into the rishus of Hashem. Misham tashul me'av v'chadamisha. So therefore the Gemara says, scratch the pshat, back to the drawing board. The truth of the matter is, if Marshall is makdishit, it's not like mocher. Ela la'ilam loishna kachim kachim v'loishna kachim kalim. That's not like selling it. Aye. Udikashalach mali machra lehedyet mali machara lehedyet mali machara l'shamayim. What's the difference if you're selling it to someone else, selling it to Gedalia, or being makdish at l'gavaya? It's moving out of Marshall's rishus. So the Gemara says, when Marshall sells it to Gedalia, it's not Marshall's anymore, it's Gedalia's. When Marshall is makdish it, it's still called Marshall's carbon. So it doesn't move out of his rishus. Says the Gemara, Mecharo lehedyet meikara tura de Ruvain. Initially it's the axe of Ruvain, Mahashta tura de Shimon. Initially it's Marshall's axe, and now it's going to be Gedalia's. Mecharo l'shamayim meikara tura de Ruvain. Initially it's Marshall's axe, Mahashta tura de Ruvain, and now it's Marshall's carbon. So that's not tantamount to Mechira. Now that's not a universal svara, but that's the svara that the Gemara wants to suggest now. Okay. Just getting underway on a very long night this evening, because we have a Chumash shir after the daf, and then after the Chumash shir we have the Mishnayos, so it's a full schedule today. I'm trying. I can't say for sure, but I'm trying that tomorrow night there should be a chok. I'm trying. I didn't finish it yet, but I'm feeling well enough to put the pedal to the metal to try. We do need a sponsor for the chok if anybody wants to sponsor it for tomorrow night. Now,
can I sponsor that shore that I stole?
You certainly can. $500, we'll call it evening.
It's Hegdish.
Now, okay, so you can give the money to Hegdish. You heard that everybody, Marshall is sponsoring the shore in front of 1 million Haimish Yidden. We'll take 6 bikes. We'll call it even. The Gemara tells us, Rabbi Shimon Omer. Now, Rabbi Shimon makes a distinction between whether it's kochim shechayev b'achriyusan and kochim she'enon chayev b'achriyusan. Now, let me just repeat you the halacha of Reb Shimon from the Mishnah. So Reb Shimon says that if Marshall steals it, dedicates it, and then slaughters it, then he doesn't pay dal v'hei. So Reb Shimon says, if it's kochim shechayev b'achriyusan that he's responsible for, he pays dal v'hei. If it's what he's not responsible for, then he doesn't. So the Gemara thinks that Reb Shimon disagrees with what we said earlier. And Reb Shimon holds that when you're makdish something, it's tantamount to mechira, because you're moving it into the rishus of hektish. And therefore, it's like selling it, and that's why you're chayiv for daled hay. Imrei, so the Gemara says, Nehei desav Reb Shimon. Even though we could suggest that Reb Shimon holds, unlike what we concluded before, that mali mecharoi lahedyet, mali mecharoi l'shamayim, what's the difference whether he sold it to Gedalia or who is makdish it, thereby selling it to heaven or conveying it to heaven? But then it should be just the opposite. Ipcha mebayle. Kochim shechaya be'achriyusin, if he dedicated it as a neder as a Hari Olai variety. I accept upon myself, where he's still responsible for it, and we said that since he's responsible for it, it's still considered his, because Davar al Gayrim Lamaman Kamaman Dami, if it gets lost, he has to replace it. So there, we should say he's not Chayiv, because then it never moved out of his Rishus. Potter. Then it didn't go out of his Rishus. Ta'akati loy nafik m'Rishusay. Kochim she'enoi Chayiv b'achri yusan. But if it's Zu, he says this one, so if it gets stolen or lost, he's not responsible, so he doesn't have a vested interest in it, so then it taka moved out of his Rishus, then Chayiv, the Mapkalei Rishusay, so it should be just the opposite. So the Gemara says, no, Reb Shimon is going on something else. A new case. Really amazing. Amr Reb Shimon, Amrei, the Gemara says, Reb Shimon al Milsach Ritekai. He's going on something else. Vachi Ketani. Eina Goinev Achar. If Marshall steals, Berish stole it from Abi. And Berish stole it from Abi. And Marshall stole it from Berish. He won't pay, even if Marshall slaughters it or sells it. He doesn't pay dalad v'hei. V'chein goynev hektish mibeis bailim, and likewise, if Marshall steals from Abi hektish, Abi had hektish, and Marshall steals from Abi hektish, Potter. Why? My timer. What's the reason? Because v'gunav mibeis ish, you have to steal it from the owner. V'loy mibeis hektish, not from hektish. So since Abi was makdish it already, so it's not considered the house of the owner. So on there, Reb Shimon says, it depends. Shimon I mekachim shechayev b'achri yusan. If it was a neder where Abi said Hari Olai, so he's responsible if it gets lost or stolen, so then that's still considered Abi's, and it's still considered Mebeis Ish. Chayiv, my time, Karina Maybe Guna Beis Ish, because since Abi still has a vested interest in it because he's responsible, so that's still considered Beguna Mebeis Ish. But V'she'ena Chayiv B'achri Yusan, but if he's not Chayiv for it, in other words, if he said Arizeh or Arizu, so he has no vested interest, because if it gets stolen or lost, he's not responsible. Potter, the problem is we're going to run into a different problem over here. This is going according to Reb Shimon. Now, since it's talking about where Abi was makdish it, and then Marshall stole it and slaughtered it, how could Marshall be chayiv? The slaughter of kochim outside the temple is not kosher, and therefore it's no good, because Reb Shimon, remember, all over Shas, Reb Shimon holds shchita she'ena ru'uya lo yishma shchita. A shchita that's not fit is not a good shchita. So michtei shamina leilu Reb Shimon, da'ama shchita she'ena ru'uya lo yishma shchita. A shchita that's not fit is not a good shchita. So kochim nami. So when Marshall steals the kochim from Abi and slaughters it outside of the temple, kochim b'chutz is not edible. Shchita she'ena ru'uya. So now the Gemara is going to offer three interesting terutzim to this question.
People might wonder about the Talmidim and the Shir stealing from each other.
No, it was only you, basically. Says the Gemara, there Shali is by a chasana. Every person at that chasana knows to watch out and lock their doors for Marshall of Chicago. It's a Lakewood chasana. So says the Gemara, we got alarms, and also it says, by the way, beware of dog.
You saw my hat.
Yeah, Now, so Kiyas Rav Dimi Amar Reb Yochanan, very interesting. Marshall steals it, the hektish from Abi, and shechts it in the Beis Hamikdash for Abi's sake. So it's a good shechita. He stole the shlomim from Abi, and then had it slaughtered in the Beis Hamikdash as a shlomim l'shem Abi. So it's a good shechita. That's why he has to pay dal v'hei. So the Gemara says, why does he have to pay dal v'hei? Then he returned the principle to Abi. He did it what Abi was supposed to do with it. Says the Gemara, Marshall's luck, the blood spilled. So the carbon wasn't good. So he never returned it to Abi. He stole it from Abi. He shechted it. It was a good shechita, but since the blood spilled, now Abi wants to get him for dalal v'hei also. Only, it says, Basar ganva osla ganvanusa. Thievery chases the thief. Right? So, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avin, shenish b'chadam, the blood spilled. That's one teretz. Even Baruch is getting a kick out of this. The Gemara says another teretz. Kiyas Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan b'shoichet tmimim b'fnim. He shechted the shlamim inside for himself. Now the din is if you shecht a korban shaloi lishma, not for the shem bailam, the korban is kosher. It's just loyolu l'bailam l'shem chayvet. Abi doesn't fulfill his requirement; he has to bring another korban. But the korban is kosher, so it's a shechita reuya. But since Marshall slaughtered it improperly, not for Abi, he's chayiv for the gneva and he's chayiv for the slaughtering. That's why he's chayiv dal v'hei. Says Gemara Kiyas Rabban Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishaichet Tmimim B'Fnim, but Shaloi L'Shem Bailam. That's the second teretz. And as we turn to Daf Ayin Vav Amid Beis, I just want to warn you that it's a small Amid. I'm sorry. I know the people over here think they're getting gypped, but don't worry. There's a Chumash here, so don't worry. And if the Chumash here is not enough, there's a Mishnah here afterwards, so don't worry. Reish Lakish Amar. Reish Lakish says a third teretz. B'shoichet balei mumim b'chutz. It's talking about where he stole the hektish from Abi. It got a mum. Now once it gets a mum, you could shecht it outside. When you shecht it outside, you have to redeem it, but you could shecht it outside. So it's a shechita reuya. So let's see it inside. B'shoichet balei mumim b'chutz. So now the Gemara asks a problem with Rabbi Yochanan, and most of the Mefarshim learn it's surely a problem with the first pshat of. It's surely a problem with the first pshat that the blood spilled. So it's a shaila with Rav in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. It's surely a shaila of Rav Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. As we welcome in over here, who's this that's joining us? Eib Arbach, Pesach Ziegelman, Harrison Kletzel is coming on as our 27th Zoomer of the evening. We had a lot of late arrivals tonight, but you know the rule of this share is you're welcome anytime, every time, no matter where you are, even if you're in a wedding, and you ditched the chair to go to a wedding, whatever it is. Hockey game. Nobody on my share would go to a hockey game instead of coming to share. It would never happen. Nobody would. It would never happen, Marshall. You're not allowed to talk lashon hara about yourself. Now, Rabbi say that's one of the great stories of the Chofetz Chaim. Somebody traveled to Radin to meet the Chofetz Chaim. He traveled hundreds of miles to meet the Chofetz Chaim, and he comes in Radin into the Beis Medrash. And he's looking, and he sees an older man sitting in the middle of the shul, and he goes over to him and he asks him, do you know where the great Chavetz Chaim is? So the Chavetz Chaim looks at him, and he says to him, I know him, but he's not great. He's a God-fearing Jew. So the man looked at him in horror and said, how dare you speak about the Gadol Hador that way? And he smacked the Chavetz Chaim. Anyway, later on in the night, he came from Mariv, and then the Chavetz Chaim is sitting in the front. So the man saw, and he whispered to him, who's that man in the front? So they said, oh, that's the Chavetz Chaim. So he runs over, and he falls on the floor, and he's crying, and he says he traveled hundreds of miles to smack the Gadol Hador. So the Chavetz Chaim turned to him warmly and said to him, all my life I dedicated to Lashon Hara, and you taught me a new thing I didn't know. And that is that you're not allowed to talk Lashon Hara about yourself. And that's why I got smacked. So, of course, when Marshall says that he would miss a shiur for a hockey game, he's joking, he's joshing, because he would never talk Lashon Hara about himself. Never. It's not allowed. But anyway, and all of us cannot be makabel. It's absolutely, it can't be makabel. Now, the smack is not enough. Anyway, so the Gemara asks an interesting question now. We asked, how could it be that it's talking about where Marshall was stole it, and he was makdish it. He was, excuse me, it's talking about where Marshall stole the hektish of Abi, and then he shechted it when it was a tamim for Abi, but the blood spilled, or he shechted it for himself, and that's why it's a shchita ru'uya, but it's not a shchita ru'uya. Shchita ru'uya means that it should be ready at the time of shchita. But if it's kachim, it's not ready at the time of shchita. It's only ready at the time of zrika. So how could you be mechayev him for the shchita? That's not a shchita ru'uya. It only becomes to be permitted to be eaten by the zrika. Let's see it inside. Toiba Rabbi Yochanan shchita moteres, v'aloi zrika moteres. It's only the zrika, the sprinkling of the blood, that makes the meat permitted. So that means the shchita itself was a shchita she'eina ruya, which according to Reb Shimon doesn't have a din of shchita. And even according to Reish Lakish, where he said that the animal got a mum, and that's why he was able to shecht it outside, but it's not fit until he redeems it, because until he redeems it, it's kachim, that's about mum, he can't eat it. So then again, the shchita doesn't matter it. The redemption is matter it. So it's again not a shchita ru'uya. The Reish Lakish shchita materes, v'alei padiyah materes. It's the redemption that's matter it. Says the Gemara, and it's really a clever answer. You know, we have all over Shas the idea of kala oimed legazes kegazes dami. Whatever is fit to be shorn, it's as if it's already shorn. Ha'oimed liktzar, whatever is ready to be harvested, kekatzer dami. Here also, ha'oimed lizraik kezrika dami, kezarik dami. And ha'oimed liftais kepadui dami. And therefore it's considered shchita ru'uya. And that's what the Gemara says. Ishtamitzei hadu Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon himself says, kol ha'oimed lizraik kezarik dami. Whatever is ready to be sprinkled, we view it as if it was already sprinkled. And the kol ha'oimed liftais, whatever is ready to be redeemed, kepadui dami. And the Gemara is going to prove now where he says kol ha'oimed lizraik kezarik dami. Now, I want to tell you that in order for food stuff to be mekabel tumah, it has to be right to be eaten. because it says Mikol oichel asher ye'achel. Only food stuff is susceptible to tumah, but only when it's fit to be eaten. Now, Rab Shimon holds that even if it's not fit to be eaten now, but it had a shasa kosher when it was fit to be eaten, it's mekabel tumah, even though it's not fit now. As the Gemara tells us, the Tanya Rab Shimon Omer, yesh noiser. Now, noiser is an isser koros. That's when a carbon is left beyond its shelf life. Like kachim, like a chatas, could only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night. So after the night is over, it's noiser. And noiser is an isser koros. So Reb Shimon Omer, yesh noiser shu metame tumas oichlem. There is noiser after the night that's still susceptible to tumah. V'yesh noiser she'ein metames tumas oichlem. Ketzad. Lon bifnei zrika, if it was left overnight before you sprinkle the blood, so therefore is never fit to be eaten, it never had a shas of kosher, it's not susceptible to food contamination. La'achar zrika, but if you left it overnight after the zrika, so it was once fit to be eaten until it became leftovers, then it continues to be susceptible to tumas eichlin since it had a shasa kosher. The kaimalon, and we say that it doesn't necessarily have had to have zrika. As long as there was time to do the sprinkling. Ma'ilefnei zrika, koidem shenirul zrika. When do we say that it's not susceptible to contamination? That's if it became leftovers before it was fit to sprinkle the blood. La'achar zrika means la'achar shenir l'zrika. After zrika means after it was fit to sprinkle the blood. What does that mean? Kaidem shenir l'zrika lon. What do you mean that if before it had a time to sprinkle, it became a leftover mahi? It's talking about where you shechted it right before shkia, right before sunset. So you had no time to do the zrika. There was no time to do the sprinkling of the blood. You shechted it right before sunset. So since there was no time to do the zrika, and then it was left overnight, it never had a shasa kosher to be fit for eating, so it's not susceptible to tumah. If it's after it was fit to sprinkle it, what does that mean? You did it 15 minutes before sunset. You had time to sprinkle it, even if you didn't sprinkle it. But it's as if it sprinkled, and therefore it had a shasa kosher, and therefore it's mekabel tumah even after it becomes nicer. Now, why is it considered fit if you didn't actually do the zrika? Alma kalayim lizrak zarek dami. So you see, Reb Shimon's opinion is whatever is ready for zrika is considered like it's zarek. Over here also, we say that the shchita that was done by Marshall on the tmimim, on Abi's tamim, either it was for Abi's sake, but the blood spilled, or if it was for his own sake, even though he didn't, the shchita is before the zrika, so you might say shchita she'eina ruya, but since it's oimid lizrak, it's kezarak dami, and it therefore becomes a shchita ruya. Although I said this is an easier Gemara, but it's just that it was easier than last night, still the concepts are very foreign and not so easy. We're going to do the Chumash here now, Rabbi Isai, and if I might say so myself, a very, very worthy Chumash here.